The throne room of the Vorthian Empire, stretched wider than most human buildings, stood tall. Princess Nala stood beside her father's massive seat of power, her purple skin gleaming under the crystal lights that hung from the ceiling like frozen stars. She was tall, even for her species, with natural armor plates running along her arms and spine. Her people were warriors, bred for battle across 1,000 generations. Today, she would meet the man who would become her husband. The human delegation entered through the main doors, and Nala felt her stomach twist with disappointment. They were so small. The tallest among them barely reached her shoulder, and they looked soft with their thin skin and fragile frames. Her father, Emperor Korvax, had explained the necessity of this alliance. The humans controlled valuable trade routes and resources that the Empire needed. A marriage would seal the peace between their peoples. But looking at them now, Nala could barely hide her contempt. The human who would be her husband stepped forward. His name was Junho, and he looked utterly unremarkable. He wore simple gray diplomatic robes that hung loosely on his average frame. His black hair was neat but plain, cut short in a style that required no maintenance. His face held no scars, no marks of battle or achievement. When he bowed to her father, his movements were precise but showed no martial training that she could recognize. "Your Imperial Majesty," Junho said in perfectly accented Vorthian, "I am honored by this opportunity to serve the peace between our peoples." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Nala had expected at least some bravado, some attempt to appear strong before her father's court. Instead, this human seemed content to fade into the background. General Thax, standing to the Emperor's right, barely glanced at Junho before returning his attention to more important matters. The wedding ceremony took place 3 days later. The grand hall was filled with Vorthian nobility, their armor polished to mirror brightness, their weapons displayed proudly on their hips. Junho stood beside Nala wearing ceremonial robes provided by the palace. He looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. When the priest asked him to recite the traditional vows of protection, promising to defend his wife with his life, several courtiers laughed quietly. How could this soft creature protect anyone? Nala spoke her own vows with a voice like iron, promising loyalty and partnership. She meant every word regarding loyalty to the alliance. The partnership part felt like a lie. During the reception feast, General Thax approached their table with a goblet of Vorthian wine in his massive hand. He was the Empire's greatest warrior, decorated with medals from 50 campaigns. He looked down at Junho with barely disguised amusement. "Tell me, human," Thax said, his voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "What battles have you fought? What enemies have you conquered?" Junho smiled politely and took a small sip from his own cup. "I'm afraid I'm not a military man, General. My work has been in diplomacy and cultural exchange." "Cultural exchange," Thax repeated, making the word sound like an insult. "How fascinating. On my world, we believe strength is the only language worth speaking." "Every language has its place," Junho replied calmly. "I've found that listening often achieves more than shouting." Thax laughed, a booming sound that echoed across the hall. He clapped Junho on the shoulder, a gesture that would have been friendly between Vorthians but nearly knocked the human forward into his plate. "You are amusing, little human. I suppose someone must keep records while real warriors fight." Junho simply nodded and changed the subject, asking Thax about the architecture of the palace. The general walked away, satisfied that he had measured the human and found him wanting. That night, in their shared chambers, Nala finally spoke her mind. The rooms were vast, decorated in traditional Vorthian style with weapons mounted on the walls and battle tapestries hanging from the ceiling. Junho had politely placed his few belongings in a corner, taking up as little space as possible. "Why did you accept this arrangement?" Nala asked, her voice sharp. "You must know what they think of you. What they think of your people." Junho was standing by the window, looking out at the capital city below. He turned to face her, and his expression was calm, almost peaceful. "I know exactly what they think, and I accept it because peace is worth any personal sacrifice. Your people and mine can accomplish great things together, but only if we build trust." "Trust," Nala said bitterly. "They don't trust you. They barely acknowledge you exist." "Then I'll have to prove myself worthy of trust," Junho said simply. "Not through force or intimidation, but through patience and understanding." Nala wanted to argue, to make him understand how weak he appeared, but something in his eyes stopped her. There was no anger there, no wounded pride, just a calm certainty that made her uncomfortable in ways she couldn't explain. "I will fulfill my duties as your wife in public," she said finally. "The alliance requires that much, but do not expect more from me than duty demands." "I would never expect anything you're not willing to give," Junho replied. The weeks that followed fell into a strange routine. Junho adapted to palace life with surprising ease. He spent his mornings studying Vorthian history in the library, his afternoons attending diplomatic functions, and his evenings walking the palace gardens alone. He learned the names of every servant, every guard, every minor official. He treated everyone with the same quiet courtesy, whether they were the emperor himself or the lowest kitchen worker. The Vorthian court didn't know what to make of him. He attended military briefings but never offered opinions. He was present at strategy sessions but never questioned the general's decisions. He seemed content to simply observe and learn, taking up no more space than absolutely necessary. Nala found herself watching him more than she intended. There was something strange about how he moved, something she couldn't quite identify. His steps were always measured, his posture always balanced. When he walked through crowded hallways, people seemed to move around him without conscious thought, as if he naturally found the path of least resistance through any space. One afternoon, she encountered Hyejin, a human servant who had lived among the Vorthians for several years before Junho's arrival. The woman was arranging flowers in the main hall when Nala approached. "Tell me about him," Nala said without preamble. "About my husband. What kind of man is he really?" Hyejin's hand stilled on the flowers. For a moment something flickered across her face. Was it fear? "Respect both? He is exactly what he appears to be, Your Highness," Hyejin said carefully. "A man of peace." "You're lying," Nala said flatly. Hyejin met her eyes and Nala saw something there that sent a chill down her spine. "I serve you now, Princess. My loyalty is to this house, but some questions are not mine to answer." Before Nala could press further, Hyejin bowed and quickly left the hall. That night, unable to sleep, Nala wandered the palace corridors. She found herself drawn to the eastern courtyard, a small garden usually empty at this hour. But tonight someone was there. Junho moved through the moonlight like water flowing downhill. His movements were slow, controlled, part of some exercise or meditation she didn't recognize. There was a grace to it that her warrior's eye recognized even if she couldn't name it. For just a moment, watching him move through that pattern, Nala saw something dangerous beneath the gentle surface. Then he noticed her and stopped immediately. The moment passed. He was just Junho again, smiling apologetically. "Did I wake you?" he asked. "I'm sorry." "Just staying limber." "No," Nala said slowly. "You didn't wake me." She returned to their chambers, but sleep was even further away than before. Something was wrong, or perhaps something was right, and she simply couldn't see it yet. In the darkness, Nala stared at the ceiling and wondered who she had really married. 3 months passed like a slow river. Nala had settled into her role as Junho's wife, maintaining the appearance of unity that the alliance required. They attended functions together, dined with diplomats, and presented a united front to both their peoples. In private, they remained strangers sharing the same space. Then the emergency beacon arrived. Nala was in the war room when the message came through. Her father had summoned his top military advisors for what he called a routine briefing, but the tension in the air suggested otherwise. General Thack stood at the holographic display, his face grim as he activated the recording. The image showed a Vorthian colony world on the outer rim. Beautiful cities, farmland stretching to the horizon, millions of civilians going about their daily lives. Then the sky darkened. Ships descended, thousands of them like locusts blotting out the sun. The Catharic swarm had arrived. Nala had heard stories of the Catharic since childhood, the nightmare species that had consumed 17 civilizations across the galaxy. They were insectoid, each warrior the size of a full-grown Vorthian with blade-like limbs and acidic blood. But their true horror wasn't their physical form. It was their mind. They functioned as one organism, millions of bodies controlled by a single hive consciousness. They didn't negotiate. They didn't retreat. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next world. The recording showed the colony's desperate last stand. Vorthian warriors fought with everything they had, but the Catharic kept coming. For every one they killed, 10 more took its place. Within 3 days, the colony was silent. The Catharic had stripped it clean and moved on, leaving nothing but empty buildings and bones. 7 more colonies have fallen since then, General Thax said, his voice heavy. They're moving through our outer territories faster than we can respond. At their current pace, they'll reach the core worlds within 2 months. Emperor Korvax turned to his military council. Send word to all vassal states and allied worlds. We need every ship, every warrior they can spare. This is not a request. One of the junior officers cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, what about the humans? The Alliance Treaty requires them to provide military support in times of crisis. All eyes turned to where Junho sat quietly in the corner. He had been granted observer status in these meetings due to his marriage, but usually contributed nothing beyond his silent presence. Now everyone waited to see what the humans could offer. I'll send word to Terra Nova immediately, Junho said calmly. They'll want to help however they can. How many ships can your people contribute? General Thax asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. I'll have to check, Junho replied. But I'll get you an answer within the day. The response came faster than expected. By evening, a human military liaison had arrived via fast courier ship. Commander Mireille was a compact woman with short black hair and eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. She stood before the War Council and delivered the news that Nala had been dreading. Terra Nova can commit 3 ships to the defense effort, Mireille said. A stealth corvette and 2 support frigates. They'll arrive within the week. The silence in the war room was deafening. General Thax was the first to break it, his voice rising with each word. 3 ships, 3? We have thousands of worlds depending on this alliance, and humanity offers 3 ships? Our fleet resources in this sector are limited, Mireille replied evenly. Most of our military is deployed elsewhere. These 3 ships represent everything we can spare. Then your military is worthless, Thax snarled. He turned to Emperor Korvax. Your Majesty, this alliance has been a deception from the start. The humans promise partnership, but they offer nothing of value. They are a prey species masquerading as our equals. Nala watched Junho during this entire exchange. He sat perfectly still, his face showing no reaction to the insults being hurled at his people. How could he just sit there? How could he accept such disrespect without even attempting to defend humanity's honor? The debate raged for another hour. Several generals argued for immediately dissolving the alliance and expelling all humans from Vorthian space. Others, more pragmatic, pointed out that the trade agreements were still valuable and shouldn't be thrown away over military disappointment. Through it all, Junho remained silent. When the meeting finally ended, Nala found herself walking back to their chambers beside her husband. The palace corridors echoed with their footsteps. She wanted to say something to break the uncomfortable silence but couldn't find the words. Finally, in their rooms, she confronted him. Are you truly content to let them speak of your people that way? To call you prey? To dismiss everything humanity has accomplished? Junho was pouring himself a cup of water from the pitcher beside their bed. His hands were steady, his expression calm. General Thax is angry because he's frightened. The Catharic have never been defeated, and he sees them coming for everything he loves. He needs someone to blame. That doesn't excuse the insults. No, Junho agreed. But responding with anger would only prove him right. He thinks humans are emotional and weak. Why should I confirm his prejudices? Because you have pride, Nala said, hearing the frustration in her own voice. Because your people deserve better than to be mocked and dismissed. Junho set down his cup and looked at her. Really looked at her, with those dark, calm eyes that sometimes seem to see more than they should. Pride has killed more people than any plague, Nala. I prefer to be underestimated. It's safer that way. Safer for whom? He smiled but didn't answer. That night, Nala couldn't sleep. The images from the colony recording played behind her eyes every time she closed them. The Catharic swarming over defenses, overwhelming trained warriors through sheer numbers and relentless aggression. She had spent her whole life training for war, but she had never seen anything like this. She rose and walked through the quiet palace, trying to clear her mind. Without consciously meaning to, she found herself in the eastern courtyard again, and once again Junho was there. He moved through the same slow patterns she'd seen before, but tonight she watched more carefully. His feet never crossed, maintaining perfect balance. His breathing was controlled, each inhale and exhale timed to his movements. And there was something else. Something in the way he held his hands as if they were gripping weapons that weren't there. This wasn't meditation. This was training. Junho must have sensed her watching because he stopped mid-movement and turned. "Trouble sleeping?" he asked gently. "The Catharic," Nala said, deciding on honesty. "I've never seen anything like them. How do you fight something that doesn't fear death? That doesn't retreat or negotiate?" Unyo was quiet for a moment, his face thoughtful. "You find their weakness. Every enemy has one, no matter how strong they appear. And if they have no weakness, then you create one." Before Nala could ask what he meant, a guard rushed into the courtyard, his armor clanking with urgency. "Princess, your father requires you in the command center immediately." The command center was chaos when they arrived. Screens showed fleet movements, casualty reports, and strategic projections. None of it was good. The Catharic had split their swarm, attacking multiple targets simultaneously. The Vorthian fleet was stretched thin, trying to protect too many worlds with too few ships. "They're adapting," General Thack said, pointing at the tactical display. "Every time we develop a new strategy, they counter it within days. It's like they're learning from us faster than we can learn from them." Emperor Korvax looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Recommendations?" "We need to consolidate our forces," Thack said. "Abandon the outer colonies and create a defensive line around the core worlds. Let the Catharic have the rim, we save what we can." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Abandoning the outer colonies meant leaving billions of Vorthians to die. But what choice did they have? Unyo, standing in his usual place in the corner, spoke for the first time. There might be another option. Every eye in the room turned to him. General Thax looked like he wanted to snap at the human for daring to speak, but the Emperor raised a hand for silence. "Go on," Korvax said. "The Catharic are coming to Vorthia Prime," Junho said simply. "They're not interested in the outer colonies. Those are just appetizers. They want the capital. They want to break you here at the heart of your empire." "That's ridiculous," Thack said. "Why would they bypass easier targets?" "Because they're not just hungry," Junho replied. "They're making a statement. They've consumed 17 civilizations, but never one as powerful as the Vorthian Empire. If they can break you, they prove that no one can stand against them." The logic was sound, Nala realized with growing dread. And if Junho was right, they had even less time than they thought. "Then we fortify Vorthia Prime," the Emperor said decisively. "Call back the fleet. Concentrate everything we have here." As the meeting dissolved into tactical planning, Nala noticed Hyejin slip into the command center and whisper something in Junho's ear. His expression didn't change, but he nodded once. 3 days later, the Catharic swarm arrived at Vorthia Prime. The warning siren started at dawn. Nala was in the armory, checking her equipment with the other warriors who would defend the palace. Her ceremonial armor had been replaced with full battle gear, the plates reinforced and sealed. Around her, generals and soldiers made their final preparations. Everyone knew what was coming. The Catharic swarm had bypassed the outer defensive satellites through a brutal strategy that no Vorthian commander would have considered. They had sent millions of their own warriors directly into the weapons fire, using their bodies as shields for the ships behind them. The sacrifice was horrifying and effective. Now the main swarm was descending on the capital moon where the Imperial Palace stood. Emperor Korvax had ordered all non-combatants to the underground shelters, massive bunkers designed to survive orbital bombardment. Junyo, as a diplomat with no military value, was expected to go with them. But when Nala went to their chambers to tell him, she found him standing by the window, watching the dark shapes descending through the atmosphere. He was still wearing his simple clothes, looking impossibly calm as death fell from the sky. "You need to get to the shelters," Nala said. "Now." "No," Junho replied quietly. "I don't think I will." Before Nala could argue, Hyejin entered the room carrying a long bundle wrapped in dark cloth. The human servant's face was serious, almost reverent. She didn't look at Nala at all. Instead, she bowed deeply to Junho, not the polite bow of a servant, but the formal bow of a soldier recognizing a superior officer. "Captain," Hyejin said softly. "It's time." "Captain?" Nala's mind raced. What was happening? Hunyo took the bundle and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a sword. Not an energy weapon or powered blade like the Vorthian military used, but an ancient style of weapon that Nala had only seen in museums. The blade was dark metal, folded thousands of times during its creation, forming a pattern like flowing water frozen in steel. The edge caught the light and seemed to drink it in. The handle was wrapped in worn leather, smooth from years of use. This was not a ceremonial weapon. This was a tool that had seen real combat. "Thank you, Hyejin," Junho said, and his voice was different now. There was a weight to it, an authority that made Nala take an unconscious step back. He turned to face her, and for the first time since their wedding, Nala saw her husband clearly. The gentle expression was gone. The quiet, unassuming diplomat had vanished. In his place stood someone else entirely. His eyes were still calm, but now she recognized what she had been seeing all along. It wasn't peace. It was the stillness of a predator conserving energy before the hunt. "What is this?" Nala asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "This is who I am," Junho said. He lifted the sword, testing its weight and balance with movements that spoke of absolute familiarity. "My name is Junho, captain of the Ghost Corps, 3rd Reconnaissance Strike Team. I have served for 20 years across 17 worlds. I fought in the Breakwater Campaign, where we held a supply line against enemy forces for 47 days with only 30 soldiers. I survived the siege of New Kyoto, where we fought in the streets for 6 months. I was there at the purging of the Gehenna Gate, where we closed a dimensional rift that had already consumed 3 systems. The palace shook violently. The Catharic had reached the outer walls. Explosions echoed through the stone corridors. Somewhere in the distance, Nala heard Vorthian warriors shouting orders and weapons powering up. "I am a soldier," Junho continued, his voice cutting through the chaos with absolute clarity. "And right now the enemy is at the gate. So you're going to take your best warriors and protect your father in the throne room. Create a defensive line that can hold if the Catharic break through. Hyejin will go with you. And what will you do?" Nala asked, though she was beginning to understand. Junho looked at her, and she saw something in his expression that made her blood run cold. It wasn't anger or fear. It was focus. Pure, absolute, terrifying focus. "I'm going to buy you time." "You can't face them alone," Nala said. "There are hundreds of them, thousands. I know." He walked toward the door, sword in hand. "But I've fought worse odds before, and I made a promise when I married you. I said I would protect you with my life. I meant it." Nala wanted to argue, to order him to stay, but the words died in her throat. This wasn't the man she had married. Or rather, this was the man she had married, and she had been too blind to see him. The quiet diplomat, the patient scholar, the gentle husband, those weren't masks exactly. They were choices. And now he was choosing something else. "Hyejin," Junho said, "your duty now is to protect the princess. Keep her alive. That's an order." Hyejin bowed again. "Yes, Captain." Then he was gone, moving down the corridor with swift, silent steps that seemed to make no sound at all despite the chaos around him. Nala stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then training took over. She grabbed Hyejin's arm and ran toward the throne room. Behind them she heard the sound of the outer wall collapsing, followed by the inhuman shrieking of the Catharic as they poured into the palace. The throne room was already being fortified when they arrived. Emperor Korvac stood at the center, directing his warriors with calm authority despite the desperate situation. General Thax was organizing defensive positions, placing their best fighters at choke points. "Where is your husband?" the Emperor asked when he saw Nala. "He's gone to the breach point," Nala said. "He said he would buy us time." Thax laughed bitterly. "The human? One soft diplomat against the swarm? He'll be dead in seconds." But Nala was already moving to the security monitors that lined the wall. She found the feed from the main corridor leading to the breach and activated the screen. What she saw made no sense. Junho stood in the center of a wide hallway, alone, as the first wave of Catharic warriors came around the corner. There were dozens of them, each one a nightmare of blade limbs and armored carapace. They saw him and charged, their inhuman voices rising in a wave of sound that should have frozen any creature with fear. Junho didn't freeze. He moved. The first Catharic died before Nala even saw him strike. One moment the creature was charging, the next it was falling in 2 pieces, its acidic blood spraying across the walls. Junho had already moved past it, his sword flowing through another enemy, then another. His movements were nothing like Vorthian combat styles. There was no wasted motion, no dramatic flourishes. Every step, every cut, every turn was efficient and lethal. A Catharic tried to flank him. Junho ducked under its strike, used the creature's own momentum to spin it into the path of 2 more enemies, then cut through all 3 before they could recover. He was reading their movements, predicting their attacks before they happened, turning their numbers against them. More Catharic poured into the corridor. Junho fell back step by step, each retreat calculated and controlled. He used the narrow space to his advantage, forcing the swarm to come at him in manageable numbers. Bodies piled up, creating obstacles that slowed the next wave. When the Catharic tried to crawl over their dead, Junho was already moving, cutting down the exposed attackers before they could regain their footing. Around Nala, the Vorthian warriors had gathered to watch the feed. No one spoke. Even General Thax stood silent, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. "What manner of creature is he?" someone whispered. Yejin answered, her voice soft but carrying across the silent throne room. "He is human. You asked what we had to offer in this war. You wanted to know what humanity could contribute. This is your answer. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest or the toughest. But we have spent our entire existence as prey animals who refuse to die. We learned to hunt things bigger and stronger than us. We learned to kill with precision instead of power. We became the most dangerous thing in our world, and then we carried that skill into the stars." On the screen, Junho killed 3 more Catharic in a single flowing combination of strikes. His breathing was labored now, Nala could see. There was blood on his clothes, his own blood from dozens of minor wounds where the Catharic had gotten too close. But he didn't slow down. If anything, he moved faster, as if injury had removed some final restraint. "How long can he hold?" Emperor Korvax asked quietly. "As long as necessary," Yejin replied. "That's what we do." The Catharic kept coming. Junho kept fighting, and in the throne room Nala finally understood who she had married. Not a diplomat playing at peace, not a scholar hiding from war, but a warrior who had earned the right to choose peace, and who would pay any price to protect it. The feed showed Junho falling back again, his sword work becoming more desperate as the numbers overwhelmed him. He was tiring. Even he couldn't hold forever. Then through the palace's exterior monitors, Nala saw 3 human ships break through the Catharic swarm above them. They were small, designed for speed and stealth rather than direct confrontation. They didn't try to fight the main swarm. Instead, they dove straight for the palace, deploying troops directly onto the landing platforms. Human soldiers, 30 of them, each one moving with the same lethal efficiency as Junho. They wore light armor and carried weapons that seemed too simple to be effective. But as they engaged the Catharic that had broken through the outer defenses, Nala saw the same pattern: precision over power, skill over strength. The humans fought their way through the palace corridors. Nala reached the corridor just as the human medics were loading Junho onto a transport stretcher. His eyes were closed, his face pale beneath the blood and dirt. She pushed past a startled Vorthian guard and knelt beside him. "Is he dying?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. One of the medics, a young human woman with tired eyes, checked a device attached to Junho's wrist. "No, Your Highness. Exhaustion, blood loss, and about 20 minor wounds. But he'll survive. Humans are tough to kill." The medic said it matter-of-factly, as if this was just another day. Perhaps for them it was. Nala looked down at her husband and saw his eyes flutter open. For a moment they found hers. "Did I buy you enough time?" he asked weakly. "You bought us more than time," Nala replied. "You bought us hope." Then his eyes closed again and the medics carried him away to the palace medical wing. Nala stood in the corridor surrounded by the bodies of dozens of Catharic that one man had killed. The walls were scorched with their acidic blood. The air still smelled of violence and death. But the palace stood. Her father lived. The Empire survived. Commander Mirai approached, her armor dented but her expression calm. "Princess Nala, I apologize for the dramatic entrance. We would have arrived sooner, but we needed to find a path through the swarm." "Your 3 ships?" Nala said slowly, understanding dawning. "They're not warships." "No," Mirai agreed. "They're Ghost Corps vessels, built for infiltration, assassination, and precision strikes. We don't fight the kind of battles your Empire fights. We fight the battles that happen in shadows, where numbers don't matter as much as skill." She paused, looking at the carnage around them. "Captain Junho was one of our best. When he requested retirement to pursue this diplomatic marriage, we thought he was crazy. But he earned the right to choose his own path. You knew," Nala said. "All of you knew who he was, and you let him pretend to be ordinary." "We didn't let him do anything," Mirai replied with a slight smile. "Junho does what Junho wants. Always has. He spent 20 years being a weapon. He wanted to be a person for a change. We respected that. She looked toward the medical wing. Guess the galaxy had other plans. Over the next week, the situation stabilized. The Catharic had retreated after failing to take the palace, but they hadn't left the system. They were regrouping, preparing for another assault. But now the Vorthian Empire had time to bring in reinforcements, to prepare better defenses. More importantly, they had a new ally who actually understood how to fight the swarm. Nala spent most of her time in the medical wing, watching over Junho as he recovered. The Vorthian doctors were fascinated by human physiology. They had treated injuries that would have killed most species, yet Junho was walking within 3 days, training again within 5. Your husband's body is covered in old scars, one doctor told her privately. Some of them should have been fatal. Humans have an extraordinary ability to survive trauma. It's not that they're harder to injure than other species. They just refuse to die from it. On the 6th day, Emperor Korvax visited Junho personally. Nala was there when her father entered the medical chamber, flanked by guards but moving with purpose. The Emperor looked at Junho, who was sitting up in bed reviewing tactical reports on a data tablet. Then the Emperor did something Nala had never seen him do before. He knelt beside the bed and placed his massive hand over his heart, the Vorthian gesture of deepest respect between warriors. "You saved my daughter," Korvax said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my house. You saved my empire. I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid." Junho set down the tablet and met the Emperor's eyes. "You owe me nothing, Your Majesty. I protected my wife. That's what husbands do." "You did more than that," Korvax insisted. "You showed us what true strength looks like. We Vorthians have always prided ourselves on our warrior culture, our physical power, but you taught us that strength without wisdom is just brutality. You are a warrior and a scholar, a soldier and a peacemaker. You are what we should aspire to be." Later that day, General Thax also visited, though his pride clearly made it difficult. The massive warrior stood in the doorway for a long moment before entering. "I was wrong about you," Thax said bluntly. "Wrong about your people. I called you prey, but I was a fool. You are predators who choose not to hunt unless necessary. That is not weakness. That is discipline." Junho smiled slightly. "I don't blame you for your assumptions, General. We humans have learned that appearing harmless is often the best defense. Let others think we're soft. Let them underestimate us. It gives us an advantage if things go wrong." "A dangerous strategy," Thax observed. "Yes," Junho agreed, "but effective." Thax hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been bothering him. "How did you fight like that?" "I watched the recordings a dozen times. You should not have been able to hold them off. The numbers were impossible." Junho considered his answer carefully. "My people have a saying. Violence is rarely the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer. We spent most of our history fighting each other, developing weapons and tactics and martial disciplines. We got very, very good at killing. Then we reached the stars and found other species, most of them physically superior to us. We had a choice, adapt or die. So we took everything we learned from our bloody history and refined it. We can't match Vorthian strength or Kalari speed or Draxian armor, but we can outthink them, outmaneuver them, and outlast them. We turned our weakness into our greatest weapon." "And the cost?" Thax asked quietly. "The cost is that warriors like me can never truly rest," Junho said, and for the first time Nala heard weariness in his voice. "We train from childhood. We fight for decades. We see friends die. We kill enemies without counting. And even when we try to walk away to be something other than weapons, the galaxy finds a way to pull us back." He looked at Nala. "I wanted peace. I wanted to be a husband, maybe someday a father. I wanted to plant a garden and study philosophy and grow old doing nothing more violent than arguing about poetry. But that's not who I am. Not really. I'm a soldier who dreams of peace, not a peaceful man who can fight when necessary. There's a difference," the words hung in the air. Nala felt something twist in her chest, a mixture of sadness and understanding. She had been angry at him for hiding his true nature, but now she understood that he hadn't been hiding. He had been hoping that he could be something else, hoping that the violence could finally end. That night, alone in their chambers, Nala sat beside Junho and held his scarred hand. He was healing quickly, but some wounds went deeper than flesh. "Tell me about the Breakwater campaign," she said softly. Junho was quiet for a long time. Then he began to speak, his voice low and steady, describing battles fought on distant worlds, decisions made in impossible situations, friends lost to enemy fire. He talked for hours, and Nala listened, finally learning the truth about the man she had married. When he finished, the twin moons of Vorthia Prime were high in the sky, casting silver light through their window. "I'm sorry," Junho said finally. "I should have told you all of this from the beginning." "No," Nala replied. "I understand now why you didn't. You were trying to protect something precious, the possibility of a different life." "And now that possibility is gone," Junho said, not quite a question. Nala squeezed his hand. "No, it's just changed. You are a warrior, yes, but you're also my husband. You're also a diplomat and a scholar. You contain all of these things. The question is not who you are, but who you choose to be in each moment." Junho turned to look at her, and she saw hope in his eyes for the first time since the battle. "And who do you want me to be?" "Yourself," Nala said simply. "All of yourself. The warrior and the poet. The killer and the gentle soul. I was wrong to despise what I thought was weakness. I was wrong to respect only strength. You taught me that the greatest strength is choosing when to use your power and when to hold it back." "That's a difficult lesson," Junho said. "Yes," Nala agreed, "but I had a good teacher." They sat together in the moonlight, neither speaking, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them. The arranged marriage had become something real. The duty had transformed into partnership. Outside, the Catharic swarm still circled the system, waiting for their next opportunity. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the crisis began, Nala felt certain they would survive it, because they had something the Catharic didn't understand. They had warriors who knew how to be more than weapons. They had strength tempered with wisdom. They had humans, and as Junho had proven, underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. 6 weeks after the battle for Vorthia Prime, Junho was cleared for full duty. The palace had been repaired, the dead honored, and the defenses strengthened. But the real change wasn't visible in the stone walls or the new weapon emplacements. It was in the people. Vorthian warriors now trained alongside human Ghost Corps soldiers in the palace courtyard. At first, the Vorthians had approached these sessions with barely concealed contempt. They were larger, stronger, and had centuries of warrior tradition. What could these small humans possibly teach them? The answer came quickly and painfully. Nala watched from a balcony as General Thax faced off against Commander Mirai in a training match. Thax had 2 feet of height and probably 3 times her weight. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a physical confrontation. The match lasted 8 seconds. Mirai used his size against him, redirecting his charge and putting him face first into the training mat before he fully understood what had happened. "Again," Thax demanded, climbing to his feet. They sparred 15 more times. Thax lost every match, but each time he learned something new. By the end of the session, he was actually landing hits, adapting to Mirai's style. Other Vorthian warriors watched and learned. Pride gradually gave way to respect, then to genuine interest. Junho observed these training sessions but rarely participated. He was working on something else, something that required him to spend long hours in strategy meetings with the Emperor's War Council. The Catharic swarm hadn't left the system, but they hadn't attacked again either. They were waiting, watching, learning. Their hive mind was patient in a way that individual creatures could never be. One evening, Nala found Junho in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet movements, supply lines, and probability calculations. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from too many sleepless nights. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she said, bringing him a cup of the bitter Vorthian tea he had developed a taste for. "We don't have time for rest," Junho replied, accepting the tea gratefully. "The Catharic are studying us. Every day we don't attack, they learn more about our defenses, our tactics, our psychology. We need to strike first, but we need to do it right." "What do you mean?" Junho gestured at the displays. "The Catharic have consumed 17 civilizations, but they've never faced coordinated resistance from multiple species. They expect us to fight like Vorthians, direct confrontation, honor-bound tactics, strength against strength. They don't expect us to fight like humans." Over the next week, Junho's plan took shape. The human Ghost Corps would provide training in asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and psychological operations. Small mixed teams of humans and Vorthians would be deployed to harass the Catharak supply lines, targeting their resource-gathering operations. Instead of fighting the swarm head-on, they would starve it, slow it, frustrate it. The Catharic hive mind is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness, Junho explained to the War Council. They adapt quickly to direct threats, but they struggle with unpredictability. If we can make our tactics random enough, chaotic enough, we can slow their adaptation process. Emperor Korvax studied the plan carefully. This is not how the Vorthian Empire has ever fought. No, Junho agreed. But the Vorthian Empire has never faced the Catharic before either. New enemies require new approaches. General Thax, who had become one of Junho's strongest supporters, nodded firmly. The human is right. Our traditional tactics have failed against the swarm. We must adapt or die. The vote was unanimous. The plan was approved. The first strike teams deployed 3 days later. Nala insisted on leading one of the Vorthian contingents, working alongside a human squad leader named Daehyun, who had served with Junho during the siege of New Kyoto. They hit a Catharic mining operation on a small moon, destroyed their equipment, and vanished before the swarm could respond. It was the first time in her life that Nala had retreated from a fight without finishing it, and it felt wrong. But she couldn't deny the effectiveness. Over the next month, dozens of similar strikes occurred throughout the system. The Catharic swarm, expecting a conventional defense, found themselves fighting shadows. Resources that should have been easy to gather became dangerous operations. Supply lines that should have been secure came under constant attack. The hive mind struggled to adapt because there was no consistent pattern to counter. But the cost was high. Human and Vorthian warriors died in these raids. Some were killed by Catharic defenders. Others were lost when extractions failed, or when they were simply overwhelmed by numbers. Each loss weighed on Junho, who reviewed every mission report personally and attended every memorial service. Nala watched him carry this burden and understood better what he had meant about soldiers never truly resting. He had hoped to leave this behind, but now he was responsible for training others to fight and potentially die. The weight of command was worse than the weight of combat. One night she found him standing alone in the eastern courtyard, the place where she had first glimpsed his true nature. He wasn't training this time. He was just standing looking up at the stars. Thinking about running away? She asked, only half joking. Every day, Junho admitted. But I can't. Too many people are depending on what I know, what I can teach them. He turned to face her. Do you ever regret it? Marrying me? Your life was simpler before I arrived. Nala moved to stand beside him. Simpler, yes, but not better. You've changed our entire empire, Junho. Not just our tactics or our military. You've changed how we think about strength and weakness, about honor and duty. The Vorthian Empire needed this. I needed this. Even if it means more war? Junho asked. War was coming whether you were here or not, Nala replied. The Catharic would have attacked regardless. But without you, without your people, we would have fallen. The Empire would have been the 18th civilization consumed by the swarm. Instead, we're fighting back. We're learning. We're surviving. Survival isn't victory, Junho said quietly. No, Nala agreed, but it's the first step. The breakthrough came 6 weeks later. The constant harassment had forced the Catharic to split their swarm to protect multiple resource points. This created gaps in their formation, weaknesses that could be exploited. The combined human-Vorthian fleet launched a coordinated strike, hitting 3 critical nodes simultaneously. For the first time in recorded history, the Catharic swarm retreated from a system without achieving their objective. They didn't collapse or surrender. The hive mind didn't work that way. But they calculated that the cost of continuing the assault was greater than the potential gain. They withdrew to find easier prey. The victory was celebrated throughout Vorthia Prime. Emperor Korvax declared a 3-day festival. Statues were commissioned. Junho was offered every honor the Empire could bestow, including a position as Supreme Military Advisor with authority over all Vorthian forces. He turned them all down. I'm not a Vorthian, Junho explained to the Emperor privately. I can't lead your military, but I can continue to teach, to share what humanity has learned. That's more valuable than any title. What Junho did accept was a new role, Ambassador of Integrated Defense. He would work with both human and Vorthian forces to develop joint training programs, combined tactical doctrine, and mutual defense strategies. It wasn't the retirement he had wanted, but it was closer to peace than he had been in 20 years. Months passed. The Catharic didn't return, but news arrived that they were attacking other systems, consuming other civilizations. Each report reminded everyone that the victory at Vorthia Prime was just one battle in a much longer war. But now, other species were seeking out the Vorthian-human alliance, asking for training, for support, for the knowledge that had driven back the swarm. The galaxy was learning that the Catharic could be fought. More importantly, they were learning that cooperation between species was more powerful than any single empire. One evening, nearly a year after their wedding, Nala and Junho stood on their private balcony overlooking the restored capital. The city lights sparkled like fallen stars. In the distance, they could hear music from the ongoing celebrations marking the anniversary of the victory. "Do you regret it?" Nala asked, echoing his question from months before. "Giving up your peaceful life?" Hunyo was quiet for a moment, then smiled. It was his real smile, the one she had learned to recognize, the one that appeared only when he was truly content. "I didn't give up my peaceful life," he said. "I found it. Peace isn't the absence of war, Nala. Peace is having something worth fighting for, someone worth protecting, a future worth building." He took her hand. "I have all of that now." "We have another problem," Nala said, a slight smile on her lips. Junho's expression became alert. "What problem?" "I'm pregnant." For perhaps the first time since she had known him, Junho was completely speechless. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then slowly wonder spread across his face. "Are you certain?" he asked. "The doctors confirmed it yesterday. A hybrid child, half Vorthian and half human. They say it's never happened before. They don't know what to expect." Junho laughed, a sound of pure joy that Nala had rarely heard from him. "Neither do we. But we'll figure it out. We always do." A message alert chimed from inside their chambers. Junho glanced at it and sighed.